Well, and you know what? We had a little bit longer intro than we normally do on this. We got a lot to talk about, so probably as good a time as any for Matt to go ahead and run the numbers for Prince.
All right. Dirty Mind comes in at number 160 in the 1980s on Best Ever Albums. Number 23 in 1980. Comes in at number 1043 of all time. It's Prince's fourth highest rated album on Best Ever Albums, behind 1999, Sign of the Times, and Purple Rain. I think we're going to cover all of those, so
we do. Yep.
Strap in for some Prince that's coming up. And it's the only album that we are covering tonight that made Rolling Stone's list, coming in at number 326.
You might want to strap on for some Prince over there.
Strap something on.
Well, Matt, I think the order is going to be Josh, Matt, and myself. So, Josh, take it away.
Well, I can't say I've been too familiar. I mean, I know Prince, obviously, and I know a lot of the songs, but never was an album listener per se for him. And this is one of his earlier albums, right? Where does it fall in his discography? I didn't even look that up. See this now. I'm just.
I think it's his third. It's his third album.
Okay. So, yeah.
Don't you have Wikipedia up?
I do.
You should say it on it. I thought you were the Wikipedia guy.
I am. Yeah.
We really shouldn't quote where it is if you don't know the answer, guys. I think there's people that are just slapping their head right now.
It's the third studio album.
Yeah,
yes,
I was right.
So, point being is I like seeing the evolution. That's part of the fun of doing the decade the way that we've been for the 70s and the 80s. And it's really a good combination of like funk and dance and almost like disco a lot of the times. And I think that's still harkening back to kind of the late 70s, early 80s period of when disco is still around. The album cover is crazy. Prince is oozing sexuality, as he is known to do, and he's just so serious looking also. So it's kind of this intense sexuality.
Pimpin' ain't easy, Josh.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. I mean, this album is really fun from the jump. I like the incorporation of synth into the opening song, Dirty Mind, and then it's also not only fun but pretty much sexual throughout, with a lot of tongue-in-cheek lines and explicitness. This seems to be, I feel like, the most explicit album that we've listened to up to this point.
I mean, I hope these are tongue-in-cheek lines, and also using tongue-in-cheek is also funny, because if they aren't tongue-in-cheek, we got some splaining to do.
That's true. There's kind of a throwback quality to the songs as well, such as When You Were Mine. I feel like there's some almost like doo-wop or just Motown type of sound to it. And this album really has me moving throughout listening to it. It's really fun to dance to and move to. And there's some reading the lyrics I would highly recommend if you haven't done that, listening to the album. That kind of brings it up a level for me. There's just a intensity and even like a shocking quality to it, and but I really enjoyed it. It's a great Prince album.
Yeah, I enjoyed this too. And I didn't know any of these songs. And my friend Tina, who might be the biggest Prince fan that I know, I was texting her about it, and she said, I'm like, man, this is a filthy record. And she goes, oh yeah. She goes, if an album could have a boner, it would definitely be Dirty Mind. So,
what a great tagline.
That's a great definition for this album.
So, and it's also interesting because I saw all the, pretty much every song on here has the E on Spotify for explicit.
Yeah.
Oddly enough, Head does not, which I find kind of funny. But it's like Head and When You Were Mine are the only two that don't have E's next to them.
I think it would have been if it was him getting head, but because he was giving the head, I think that's what got him off.
But it's also like, I was kind of like thinking, oh man, there's going to be lots of like, F-bombs and stuff like that, but it's not that at all. There's hardly any cursing on here. It's all just like, it's explicit in the nature and in the true form of it, just being like, it's very explicit in describing various sexual, encounters acts what
Incest.
incest, like sister, like even as a non-lyrics guy, there was something that I heard, I caught something about his sister. I'm like, he's singing about his sex about his sister, and then I read the lyrics and I was going, oh my gosh, like this is gross. And then like I read later on that he actually said, no, he's like, this album is me being me. It's not like, I think I read it somewhere that it wasn't like, I'm not trying to do anything, I'm just being myself. So I'm like, was there some sort of incestual like relationship that he had at some point in his life? Like, was this autobiographical? But anyway, as pretty much as the non-lyrics person, I agree with you, Josh. This is a very fun record. It's got all those things, like you said, it's equal parts funk, disco, dance. And I found it interesting because it also sounds dated. As good as it is, it's got this, these high-pitched, keys that definitely make it sound early 80s. I mean, and even to the point where, like, the beginning of Do It All Night, the musical intro to that song it's almost like it sounds like the beginning of an 80s sitcom, like it's like the intro to Perfect Strangers or something, the doo, 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 this bouncy kind of thing, and it just made me laugh. So on the one hand I really liked it, on the other hand it was hard to like parse away like the datedness of some of the songs on this. I wouldn't say that took away from it in a large way, or that I was like, oh my gosh, it's not good. It's far from it. This is a really solid album musically, and it does a lot in just like what 30 minutes. Yeah, 8 songs, 30 minutes, right? So and even it's got probably one slower track on here, got a Broken Heart Again, that's kind of more of like a slowed down soul R&B kind of song, but it's really good. So as someone that's not terribly familiar with Prince other than Purple Rain and singles, this was a good album to listen to. And yes, it's filthy. It's but that's kind of how Prince was. So I'm a thumbs up on it, though. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, no, this is where like Prince kind of becomes the Prince that you guys know in this album, because before it he was younger, and he was sort of as much an R&B singer, a disco-y type singer as anything else. But here's where sort of the legend of Prince comes in, that overt sexuality with the romanticism, the singing style that Prince has, sort of that like falsetto at times. Like I know it's always described often as like androgynous style of singing, and that's why Prince wrote a lot of songs, and a lot of his songs were sung by women, Sinead O'Connor, the Bangles and stuff, because his songs really are sort of designed for any type of voice to be able to tackle them. But yeah, this was an interesting fusion in 1980 of, mainstream club music like disco and pop, but also funk and elements of, I guess, what you would call urban music in that time, and kind of fused together, which is kind of what Prince would roll with for the rest of the 80s. There's, as mentioned, there's a lot of synths in here, but there's also a lot of guitar and sort of the multi-instrumentalism that Prince is known for as well. Always with Prince, you wonder how much of it is literal and how much of it is figurative, and I think probably it's a mix of both, which creates sort of that same mystery and sort of the mystery and androgyny, that kind of propels Prince's sexual, in an era where like a lot of like sexuality in music was sort of real masculine. Prince kind of carved out a different area where he's got a straight energy, but he's also got an energy that's sort of like gender fluid as well, which I think is always why Prince is an interesting person in the modern context. But I really like this album. I would probably most define this album as funky, would be the best way to describe it from a sonic palette. But it does sound, as you guys said, it does sound like it was in 1980, because what he's putting together is like an eclectic mix of what the 80s sound like. His like use of the drum machine is really interesting too. It's hard to explain, but it's got a very distinct sound on this that I don't ever recall coming on any other Prince album again. Like even in like 1999 where he used a lot of electric drums, it's not as streamlined and simple as it is on this. It's very much about sort of keeping the beat, and the guitar sort of serves the purpose of the larger bass line here. But yeah, I really like this album. It's a fun album. It's an album that has a lot of variety as well, and ends very well with Party Up. I like Dirty Mind as an opening track. I think it's a really great song. It's one of Prince's better ones. And yeah, it's do I think it rises to the level of future Prince albums as an artistic endeavor? Probably not. But if you were to tell me to put on a Prince album, would this be one of the first albums I'd turn to? Yes, for sure, because there's a replayability of this album that I can very much appreciate. And I know before, I'm trying to think too, by the way, I keep saying guitar, but I don't think it's formal guitar on this one. I think it might just be effects the more I think about it. Yeah, and it's and so I don't want to speak out of turn. This is one where I would have loved to have done a little bit more deep dig in it, but and of course Prince has the reputation of being an exceptional guitarist, as anybody who's seen, I think, remember when they did George Harrison, I think While My Guitar Gently Weeps, you kind of are like, oh shit, okay, Prince can really play the guitar, along with other instruments. And but on this one, the more I think about it, the more I think it's what I'm calling the guitar is more like a rhythm effect on the synth.
Yeah, I was gonna say I didn't really hear the guitar as a standout on this album. I kind of associate Prince with being, really showy with the guitar and having some solos or being flashy with it, and it didn't really sound that way to me. It sounded like more incorporated, like you said, or that wasn't
like in Head,
the front.
Maybe I think when I'm saying guitar, I'm talking like bass sound, because like, for example, in the song Head, right, there's that beat that like dun 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 dun, like it's basically like a funk bass line, right? But it's being, I'm pretty sure it's the synthesizer making that sound, but it sounds as if someone was. It's very similar to like what.
That part's the bass. I mean, their synth and bass is more prominent. Right. It's not. I mean, it might be a bass that's got some sort of effect on it. I mean, there are guitar. I mean, Sister's got a lot of guitar on it.
Sister's got a lot of guitar, yep.
Party Up's got some guitar on it, but it's not. It's more part of the rhythm rather than. It's not really soloing. Right. He's not shredding or anything like that. But the guitar that's being played is done more in a funk kind of style, I would say, or like
later. Yeah, he did more showy guitar work that sounded like lead guitar, whereas this doesn't have as much lead guitar on it. I did a poor job of explaining what I was trying to go for there. It was more, I think, that when I was defining the guitar, I was defining more like the bass rhythms in the same way that like Sly and the Family Stone, Larry Graham, is playing the bass in the background. There's a little bit of not the virtuoso level, but that's not, I think, what Prince was going for here. I think he was still very much in an experimental period now, because he's an incredibly young man when this album is released, which is something that we really didn't mention. That we talked about the fantastic cover, which is hilarious. Like, I feel like I should describe it for our listeners. He is in a jacket, a pair of very modestly cut. When I say modestly, I mean in terms of amount of material, as opposed to modest and look. Yeah. He has high cut briefs, and he's got a scarf as well that I believe like a
bandana or something.
A bandana, like serving in the purpose of scarf, covering his bare chest. So I mean, and he's got sort of a come hither look. And I know part of the origin story of Prince too is he grew up Jehovah's Witness, I think too. So you know what it is when you grow up sort of in a thing where sex is sort of particularly forbidden there. It's always interesting when you become hypersexual, like as a response to that, and you can't help but think that probably informed some of this album as well.
Yeah, he was 22 when this came out.
Yeah, that's. I mean, he'd
or
already
23 actually. I'm sorry. I know, don't 22. I'm sorry, he was 22. Yeah,
yep, 22.
Born in 58.
Yeah, his voice is also really high on this, higher than kind of I expected. I feel like he has a bit more range, or his vocal tone changes.
But it's a very Prince. I mean, Prince. A lot of Prince's stuff is very. I mean, is falsetto.
It's like Kiss. Kiss, like that vocal register that he's singing on that song. For those that might be familiar, and that's later stuff. But that's where he sings the vast majority of this album in that register. Yeah.
The song Kiss, not the band Kiss, right, John?
The song Kiss, yes, not the band Kiss. Prince. I don't think there was a single person who made that mistake, with the exception of maybe you, Matt. Yeah. So, but yeah, this one's a recommend for me. I enjoyed this album, and it was very different than anything else we listened to this week, which I appreciated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I recommend it also.
Mm-hmm.
And consider this to be the rough draft as we explore Prince in long form, but also cold list and hot take. I have a feeling that we're going to be able to draw connections between the albums, and this is while there were two ahead of this, I do think this is what's considered to be the first great Prince album. I know that for a fact. So so we can kind of trace some of the rest of the 80s.
Yeah, When You Were Mine had some guitar on it. Yeah, there's guitar here and there, but that actually might be my favorite song on here. I really liked When You Were Mine. It's just I don't know. I think it's got a good chorus. So it's like more of a pop song, I would say, than a dance song. But yeah, it's very solid, and thumbs up.
Absolutely.